After firing him, the CEO was in danger. He risked his life to save her. Jack Miller had always believed that a man's worth was measured not by what he owned, but by what he did when no one was watching. He was a single father of two, living in a modest apartment on the east side of the city, working double shifts at the Arcadia Group's downtown headquarters as a senior logistics coordinator. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from. For 7 years, Jack had given everything to that company, skipping vacations, missing school plays, working through illness, because he believed in loyalty, and he believed that loyalty would eventually be rewarded. He was wrong. On a cold Tuesday morning, Evelyn Sterling, the 34-year-old CEO of Arcadia Group and daughter of billionaire Robert Sterling, called Jack into her glass-walled office on the 22nd floor. Her tone was clipped, her eyes cold, and her words were short. "Mr. Miller, your services are no longer required. Please clear your desk by noon." Jack stood there for a moment, blinking, trying to process what had just happened. He had received no warning, no performance review, no explanation. He asked why, and Evelyn barely looked up from her phone. "Budget restructuring," she said flatly. "Security will escort you out." In front of his colleagues, through the open glass walls that offered no privacy and no dignity, Jack was walked to his desk, handed a small cardboard box, and guided to the elevator like a criminal. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply packed his things, a photo of his 2 kids, a small potted plant, and a coffee mug that said "Dad" in crayon letters, and he left. Outside on the sidewalk, the cold wind hit his face, and for a moment he just stood there, box in his arms, watching the city move around him like nothing had happened. He had a mortgage. He had 2 kids to feed. He had no backup plan. But Jack Miller walked to his car, placed the box gently in the passenger seat, and drove home with quiet, devastating dignity. 3 days later, Jack was at a job placement agency filling out forms when his phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. There was a fire at the Arcadia Group headquarters. Structural damage. Multiple people trapped. He told himself it wasn't his problem anymore. He drove toward the building anyway, because that was the kind of man he was. By the time he arrived, the scene was chaos. Fire trucks, screaming bystanders, thick black smoke pouring from the middle floors, the building groaning under the heat. Firefighters were working frantically, but part of the east stairwell had already collapsed, and they were being held back from entering a specific section of the 19th floor, where the ceiling had partially given way. A police officer near the barrier was shouting that someone was still. Inside, a woman, trapped under debris in the East Conference Room. Jack looked at the building. He looked at the firefighters being held back. He thought of his kids. Then he ducked under the barrier and ran inside. The smoke was immediate and suffocating, and the heat was like walking into an open furnace. But Jack had spent years in that building and knew every corridor, every stairwell, every shortcut. He covered his face with his jacket and moved low, fast, navigating by memory through the darkened hallways, stepping over fallen ceiling panels and broken glass. He found her on the floor of the East Conference Room, pinned beneath a collapsed ceiling beam, Evelyn Sterling, her sharp blazer torn, her face streaked with ash and blood, her breath shallow and panicked. She looked up at him, and her eyes went wide with recognition and disbelief. Jack didn't say a word. He braced himself against the beam, pushed with everything he had, and shifted it just enough to pull her free. Then he lifted her, one arm under her knees, one arm across her back, and he carried her through the smoke, back down the west corridor, down the emergency stairwell, and out through the side exit into the cold, clean air. Paramedics rushed in immediately, pulling Evelyn onto a stretcher, placing an oxygen mask over her face. Jack stood a few feet away, coughing, hands on his knees, lungs burning, and watched them work. He didn't wait for thanks. He turned to leave. "Wait!" a voice said behind him. He turned. Robert Sterling, Evelyn's father, stood beside the ambulance. He was a tall, silver-haired man in an expensive coat, and his eyes were wet. He had watched the rescue from outside. He had seen everything. "You're the man my daughter fired," Robert said quietly. Jack nodded. "I don't expect anything," Jack said. "I just couldn't leave her in there." Robert looked at him for a long moment. "I know," he said. "That's exactly why I need to speak with you." 2 days later, Jack sat in a quiet office at Sterling Holdings, the parent company of Arcadia Group. Robert Sterling offered him a senior operations role, better salary, better title, real stability. Jack sat with it for a moment, then said yes, not out of revenge, not out of pride, but because his kids needed him to say yes. Evelyn Sterling came to see him a week later, still bandaged on one arm, walking carefully. She stood in the doorway of his new office and looked at the floor for a long moment before looking at him. "I was wrong," she said. "The way I let you go was wrong. I was following numbers on a spreadsheet and I forgot there was a person attached to them. You could have left me in that building and no one would have blamed you." Jack looked at her steadily. "I would have blamed me," he said simply. Evelyn nodded slowly, then extended her hand. Jack shook it. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no dramatic transformation, no grand romantic subplot, no sudden reversal of the universe's cruelty. Jack still had a mortgage. He still had 2 kids who needed dinner and help with homework and someone to show up. But he had his dignity intact, a paycheck coming in, and the quiet knowledge that when everything fell apart, he had chosen to be the kind of man his children could be proud of. And sometimes, in a world that rewards ruthlessness and punishes kindness, that quiet knowledge is the most revolutionary thing a person can hold on to. If this story moved you, touched your heart, or reminded you that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, please show your love and support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel, Kindness True Stories, where every story is a reminder that goodness still exists in this world, and that the people who carry it deserve to be celebrated.